Hey everybody, welcome back to Walking with Jesus Daily. This is the recording for day 325. And we just finished up with one of my absolute favorite lines in all of the Bible, where Thomas answers him in John chapter 20, and he says, "My Lord and my God." When Jesus appears to you in the way that he does, that's all that you can do is fall at your feet and worship him and declare him as your Lord and your God, because you see him and because he comes to you. But Jesus answers him. He says, "Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." And that's really cool, because he's talking about us. If you believe like Thomas believed and like the apostles believed, who were right in front of him, that kind of belief is special. And that's what he's talking about here. I've had so many good conversations over the last couple days, but I have to share one thing. It is Thanksgiving. I'm recording this on Thanksgiving Drive. We've been invited to the Rucker holiday Thanksgiving feast, and it's very kind. We are usually either traveling home or hosting, so it's very strange for us to go somewhere. But I wake up with thankfulness in my heart, and thankful for the conversations that I've got to have over the last couple of days. But none more thankful than the conversation that I had on Tuesday night, where I feel like my car was like the Holy of Holies, and I'm just sitting here in the presence of God, and he's just literally just having this incredible conversation without words, and there's so many things from that conversation that I want to share with so many people, but he kind of just made it clear that sometimes it's good just to keep things between him and me. And that's where those things will stay. That makes it the most special conversation that I've ever had with God. And I did nothing to deserve it. I want this to be clear. I didn't do something extraordinary or do some work for him or try to show him, how much I love him by whatever. I did nothing to deserve it. I did a recording, and that was it. And anyway, my point being, God doesn't expect you to do anything special except for be his. He just wants you to love him and talk about him and be joyful in his world, as if Satan doesn't have control of it, and just keep going as if he does live in you. So we'll get started today. I just wanted to share that. I kind of want to note that down. The Tuesday before Thanksgiving in 2025 was incredible, and I don't know what date that was. What is today? 25th?
Today is the 27th.
So that would have taken place on the 25th? All right, the 25th. There's this special time of year for the Huther family that happens between basically November 17th through Thanksgiving. And I don't know why, but huge things happen in that week. So it's a cool time of year. So let's get going here. Recording for day 325 on Thanksgiving Day. And I'm going to be reading from the book of John, chapter 21, verses 1 through 14. And that's the only place we're going to be. And I'll read that in a couple different versions. And we'll take the beauty from it. John 21, 1 through 14, starting in the ESV. After this, Jesus revealed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. And he revealed himself in this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, and the sons of Zebedee, and 2 others of his disciples were together. So Simon, Thomas, Nathanael, James, John, and 2 others. That's 7. Interesting number. Simon Peter said to them, "I am going fishing." They said to him, "We will go with you." I'm not really sure why. Maybe they just needed food. But they went out and got into the boat. But that night, they caught nothing. And this is not that unfamiliar for Simon. I'm curious as to where Andrew is. Maybe he's one of the other 2 disciples. If I had to guess, one of those other 2 disciples would definitely be Andrew, because he's a fisher as well, and he's Peter's brother. But they went out, they got into the boat, and they caught nothing. And my other guess is Nathanael and Philip, because they were buddies. Okay, sorry. Just as day was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore. Yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, "Children, do you have any fish?" I love that he calls them children. They answered him, "No." But they don't know who he is. This is a hugely impactful moment. He said to them, "Cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some." And this goes back all the way to the very first time that Peter was called, right? Cast your net. And he told them where to cast it after they had caught nothing. And it's kind of cool because this was Jesus the first time as a man when they were fishing. And now it's Jesus the first time as resurrected spiritual. He's the Adam. He's the Adam of the new creation. So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of fish. That disciple whom Jesus loved therefore said to Peter, "It is the Lord." Now, why did this take place? It took place because he had already experienced this. There's only one way that this happens, and we get lost in the world and we forget. But there's only one way that something like this happens, and it's happened before. When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and threw himself into the sea. The other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, but about 100 yards off. Now, I don't know much about fishing, but I'm guessing that's not very far. I'm guessing you don't usually catch a ton of fish in that area. It says, when they got out on land, they saw a charcoal fire in place, with fish laid out on it, and bread. Also interesting. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you have just caught." So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore, full of large fish. And then we have this, 153 of them. Maybe the other disciple with him was Matthew. Maybe he was counting them. I don't know. But I find this very strange. Although Matthew didn't record this, so maybe not. But this is, I would love to get to the bottom of why that number is specifically mentioned. There were 7 fishing, so that makes sense. That number makes sense. But this 153 doesn't make any sense. And although there were so many, the net was not torn. Again, this is a reference back to the Exodus. This is a reference back to things not wearing out that should. This is all supernatural. There's no way for a catch this big to be this good. Jesus was preparing them for something, right? And they didn't haul in like a treasure chest full of gold. They hauled in fish. Jesus was reminding them to be fishers of men. They hauled in fish, so they were to sell the fish, perhaps, to share the fish. Who knows, right? To get them ready for the next journey. It didn't matter. The point was that Jesus was providing and always will and always has. Verse 12, it says, Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." Now, I've never had fish and bread for breakfast, but I sure would like to try it. Now, none of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. And it's interesting because this makes it sound like they still couldn't see him clearly. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and so with the fish. This was now the third time that Jesus was revealed to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. So, appeared to him the first time in the locked room without Thomas, second time in the locked room with Thomas, and now fishing. So, it looks like they've moved from inside a locked room to outside fishing. It looks like Peter's returning to something that is familiar to him, because maybe they're not sure what to do now that Jesus is gone. Maybe they don't know what direction to go. And this reminds me of a lot of people and a lot of part of our walk. Let's read the Passion Translation and we'll end with the Amplified. Passion reads like this. Later, Jesus appeared once again to a group of his disciples by the lake Galilee, also known as the Sea of Tiberias. There's a third name for it, but it happened one day while Peter, Thomas the twin, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, remember Nathanael, Jacob, John, so James and John, and two other disciples were together. Peter told them, "I'm going fishing." And they replied, "We'll go with you." So they went out and fished through the night. But they caught nothing. And when we go to Luke's account in 24:49, the disciples were told to wait in Jerusalem for the day they would be clothed with power. And these 7 apostles were not necessarily following what they'd been told. And maybe this was the reason that they caught nothing until Jesus joined them. He became the 8th man in this. Now it says, "Then at dawn, Jesus was standing there on the shore, but the disciples didn't realize that it was him. He called out to them saying, 'Hey guys, did you catch any fish?'" I love how the Passion puts it like that. "What's up, guys?" You can see just a Moses and Jethro moment. That's from The Promised Land on Angel Studios. You need to watch that. "Not a thing," they replied. Jesus shouted to them, "Throw your net over the starboard side and you'll catch some." And so they did, as he said, and they caught so many fish, they couldn't even pull in the net. Then the disciple, whom Jesus loved, said to Peter, "It is the Lord." When Peter heard him say that, he quickly wrapped his outer garment around him, and because he was athletic, he dove right into the lake to go to Jesus. He jumped in the water. At one point, Peter reluctantly cast the net on the other side and fell to his knees before Jesus. "You need to get away from me. I'm a sinful man." Then, at one point, Peter stepped out on top of the water and walked towards Jesus when he called him. This time, he wasn't even called. He just knew who it was. And there was no amount of fish or no amount of anything that was going to keep him from getting to Jesus. Most likely, John is the one whom, the disciple whom Jesus loved. That's what we always think anyway. And he recognized the voice of Jesus. Maybe because Peter was so focused on not catching any fish and he was going fishing that he was unable to recognize the voice of Jesus. We sometimes miss out on hearing the voice of Jesus when we're so wrapped up in the voices of this world and in the things of this world, and we forget what's going on. We get wrapped up in this worldly stuff. We need to make sure that there's no doubt or fear in our minds when we're listening for Him. And we need to make sure that we are listening for Him at all times. I know I say that, and it's like, oh yeah, it's so easy. Just listen for Him at all times and ignore everything that's going on in the world. It's not possible, but it's being able to live in the world while having your ear to the throne of God, listening for God, but being out in the world. It says that this is translated into English from Aramaic. The Greek literally says, because he was naked. This is strange, and most of the time people make a case that that's not really he wasn't really naked. He was just didn't have his outer garment on, so maybe it would be the equivalent of like fishing in your underwear. I don't know. But it does call Peter athletic as he dove in. The other disciples then brought the boat to shore, dragging their catch of fish. They weren't far from land, only about 100 meters. And when they got to shore, they noticed a charcoal fire with some roasted fish and bread. Imagine how thankful the disciples were for what had just taken place. Jesus was reminding them that there was nothing that they could do on their own, and the more they tried to do things on their own, the more they were going to fail. They needed to listen to his instructions exactly. Even if they didn't have food, even if they were bored, even if they were trying to do something for the Lord, if they were not called to do it, they needed to be patient and wait. Imagine how thankful they are to hear the Lord's voice, how thankful they are for the huge catch of fish, and how thankful they are that there was a charcoal fire waiting for them with fish and bread. It says here, just a side note, it was while standing next to a fire, this is a good point, I didn't put this together, that Peter denied Christ. Now standing next to a fire, Jesus would restore his friend. And that's tomorrow that we get into that. But then Jesus said, "Bring some of the fish you just caught." So Peter waded into the water and helped pull the net to shore. It was full of many large fish, exactly 153. But even with so many fish, the net was not torn. All right, so I'm going to read this about the 153. I can't tell you that this is what it's about, but I can tell you it's something, okay? It says, "This speaks of the great redemption of Christ for all nations and all people." 153 large fish points to a mighty harvest from among the people groups of the world. The great catch of fish begins the process of inner healing for Peter in the guilt of his denial of Christ. Peter began to follow Jesus because of a great catch of fish in Luke 5. So Jesus now repeated that miracle, inviting Peter to begin to follow him again, but in a completely new way. According to the early church father Jerome, there were 153 species of fish in Lake Galilee that would remind Peter of his original call to be a fisher of men. Now, if that's true, and it could be, maybe that's the point of the 153 different species of fish. That would mean that it's all people, all nations, all are to be called, all are to be taught, all are to know the goodness of God and who Jesus is and how to get there. That's a really cool thing. So in verse 12 it says, "Come, let's have some breakfast," Jesus said to them, and not one of the disciples needed to ask who it was, because every one of them knew it was the Lord. Then Jesus came close to them and served them the bread and the fish. This was the third time Jesus appeared to his disciples after his resurrection. Last version we'll read is the Amplified, and then Thanksgiving will be yours. John 21, starting in verse 1, Amplified. "After this, Jesus revealed himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias, or the Sea of Galilee. And he did it in this way. Simon Peter and Thomas, who's called Didymus the twin, and Nathanael from Cana of Galilee, as well as John and James, the sons of Zebedee, and two others of his disciples were together. Simon Peter said to them, 'I am going fishing.' They said, 'And we are coming with you.' So they went out and got into the boat, and that night they caught nothing. Just a side note, fishing in the nighttime was normal, and it was usually a good time to fish. I've never done that. I may have to bring it up to the fishing crew. All right. As morning was breaking, Jesus came and stood on the beach. However, the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. So Jesus said to them, "Children, do you have any fish to eat along with your bread?" They answered, "No." And he said to them, "Cast the net on the right-hand side of the boat." That would be starboard. "And you will find some." I say that would be starboard like I know what I'm talking about, but I have no idea what part of the boat that is, except for on the right-hand side of the boat. So they cast the net, and then they were not able to haul it in because of the great catch of fish. Then that disciple, most likely John, whom Jesus loved, said to Peter, "It is the Lord." So, and let's just make sure that we understand, John was special to the Lord, just like Peter was special to the Lord, just like Nathaniel was special to the Lord. So it's not that he only loved, John. He clearly loved all people. So when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer tunic, for he was stripped for work, and threw himself into the sea and swam ashore. But the other disciples came in the small boat, for they were not far from shore, only about 100 yards away, dragging the net full of fish. So when they got out on the beach, they saw a charcoal fire set up and fish on it, cooking, and bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish which you have just caught." So Simon Peter went aboard. Ooh, this is a really cool thing. Think about this. So Jesus is on the shore already cooking fish and bread. And the last time they ate together, they had the Passover meal. And it was Jesus and his disciples. And it's almost like the fish that are on there are the ones that are Jesus and his disciples. And now we're going to add other fish to the disciples. We're going to go and make disciples of all nations. And that's where the other fish come in. And Jesus says, "Bring the other ones that you have caught. They're going to join us." So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net to land, full of large fish, 153 of them. And although there were so many, the net was not torn. I'm assuming 153 large fish are powerful and would normally tear a net. Jesus said to them in verse 12, "Come and have breakfast." None of the disciples dared to ask him, "Who are you?" They knew without any doubt that it was the Lord. And I think that's important for us as well, as people who can't physically see Jesus. We do have to recognize his voice. We do need to recognize the things that he does. And we need to know that it is him at work in our lives and not something or someone else. Satan's whole goal is to deceive us, constantly deceive us. So the beauty of this is, if we know that it's Jesus, and we know that it's a work that Jesus would do, or an invitation that Jesus would send, or it's Jesus' voice, then we know that we are where we need to be. None of the disciples dared to ask him, "Who are you?" They knew without any doubt that it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and likewise the fish. Isn't that cool? Breaking bread with Jesus on the shore. This was now the third time that Jesus appeared to the disciples after he had risen from the dead. Now, this is important to notice the wording. It says this the third time that Jesus appeared to the disciples. It's clearly not the third time that Jesus appeared or made his presence known or let people know that he was alive. But it was the third time that he appeared to the disciples. So I'm not really sure how to necessarily tie this into Thanksgiving. I'm not really sure it's necessary. But I do want to say this. We have a lot to be thankful for. And I'm thankful in this that Jesus does call us out. He does speak to us. It's up to us if we're listening for him. It's up to us if we're hearing his voice or if we're distracted by the things of this world. I know that as I drive and do many of these recordings, there are billboards and signs and people and cars, and there are any number of distractions. And I don't think that any one of them are by accident. I do think those that follow the Lord are targeted. I do think that we have to remember that Satan and his demons are not allowed to come after us unless God allows it. And if God allows it, then you would think that we would just hold our ground and that we wouldn't trip back or slip back into something that we know is not of God. We wouldn't give in to those temptations. We would show God that He is everything to us, and we would remain in that place. So I hope that your Thanksgiving meal or day or whatever, regardless if you're meeting with someone, if you're not meeting with someone, if you're getting together and eating, if you're fasting, it doesn't really matter what you're doing. It's a great time to give thanks and to serve. It's a great time to remember that Jesus shared meals with people, and that was a really cool thing. And it's a lot to be thankful for. So when we do things like this, to remember to be thankful that Jesus has never stopped speaking with us, and He never will. He'll never leave us no matter what we're doing. And if we hear His voice and we obey, even if it's a strange command like throwing the net out to the other side, even though you've already fished and you haven't caught anything, just obeying Him, hearing His voice, that's how we show how much we love Him. So I pray that you all have a fantastic day, and a day full of giving thanks and giving praise. I love you, and I'll see you tomorrow.